Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Midwestern Marks live stream. I'm here with Noah for this midday stream. We're going to be talking about some interesting stuff today, including the alleged chemical gas attacks that happened in Syria, and a lot of the discourse that goes on surrounding that in America. And we'll use one of the TikToks that I made about that earlier. We'll also be talking about the popular red pill slash incel streamer Sneeko, who recently met some of his young fans and got to see what he's actually putting out into the world and the way that he's influencing people. And we'll talk about the need for good, positive streamers to offer kids an alternative, the need for people like us. And then we'll also finally do the segment that I've been teasing forever about Tower 7 and 9/11. I know I've been saying that we're going to do that for months, and we finally are, and I'm pumped about it. So we'll get into all of that right after the intro. All right. Well, we already got 2 super chats in. What a way to start the stream. Thank you guys.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. How's it going today, Noah?
I'm good. As I was saying before, I had an especially early day at work today, so it's awesome I can get home in time to join you for a midday stream. I'm excited to get into this video. For everyone watching, Eddie played me like a short clip of this Sneeko thing right before we went live. It's wild. Wow. So I'm excited about that. I have an interesting, my 9/11, I remember it very well. I have an interesting story when we get to that as well. And to answer a Yellow Light Parentheses question, no, it's not a fresh haircut, but thank you for noticing.
Looks good. Yeah, Noah was actually 40 years old when 9/11 happened, so he's got some vivid memories. I'm so sorry. I've been way too mean to Noah on stream.
I was in the hospital for my Alzheimer's, so I only remember bits and pieces of it.
Thank you so much, Ross and Sebastian, for the super chats. Of course, those super chats are how we fund our operations here at Midwestern Marks, along with our Patreon, patreon.com/MidwesternMarks. And if you can't help financially, you can help by liking the stream, subscribing, commenting, or following if you're watching on Twitch. That stuff really helps us break through the algorithmic suppression that we all know is going on. So
share the link. That really, really, really helps.
Yes, nothing helps more than that.
The algorithmic suppression is no joke. We always talk about it, but we've done a little digging on how it just when it happens to us, even if we can't see how. Things like something we release on YouTube will only get a couple of views, whereas the same thing on TikTok will blow up. Or Eddie and me will say something personally on Twitter, yet the Institute's Twitter account will get less than a third of the amount of traction it gets. So any little bit you can do to help overcome that algorithmic suppression, genuinely helps us, and we're very grateful for it.
Absolutely. Combating the Silicon Valley tech oligarchs. I mean, it is really quite shocking. I posted some political videos from my TikTok account that I had been using to talk about like wrestling and MMA and lifting weights and stuff. And it immediately blew up. It's sitting at like 700,000 views right now. And it's just interesting to see how the Midwestern Marx accounts are suppressed and some of these accounts others. And I mean, the TikTok algorithm that was designed by the Chinese company ByteDance is just so much better than all these American social media companies. It does help to have followers on TikTok. It will lead to more views, like your floor for views will raise with your amount of followers, but anyone can go viral. You could have 0 followers on TikTok and go mega viral. It's all about if your video is good. And what's interesting is the app incentivizes sharing through the duet and stitch feature. So it's like you can basically take someone else's video and use it to get views, but that in turn boosts their video and pushes people to their account. So I don't know. It's very interesting stuff.
It was originally really people-based. That's why I liked it. And honestly, I think without knowing it, that's why a lot of people liked it. Without knowing how people-based it is, it was a good algorithm. I mean, leave it to the Chinese to genuinely believe in merit rising to the top, you know?
Exactly. And they're not caught up with intellectual property and super hyper guarding everybody from sharing other people's content. Like I remember once there was this video I did about Breonna Taylor saying that if you're not in favor of Breonna Taylor defending herself when the cops came into her house, you're not in favor of the First Amendment, because the First Amendment says you're supposed to be allowed to protect yourself from a tyrannical government. I still agree with that. But some lawyer duetted my video and he got like 300,000 likes, whereas I got like 100,000. But I wasn't mad. I wasn't pissed because so many new people came and followed our Midwestern Marx account that the NATO operatives who took over TikTok now banned. But yeah, it's really interesting how the Chinese designed an algorithm that's not hyper focused on guarding intellectual property and incentivizes cooperation and sharing.
It's also good that there's no, CIA back doors into it, right?
Very true. Very true. I mean, now there probably are in the American servers, but Duck Hash Browns, thank you. Been a while since I donated. Nice to see Noah on a midday stream. Absolutely. I'm glad to have Noah joining me today. That always makes it better. Thank you so much for the $10, Duck Hash Browns. That's huge.
Well, it makes it something anyway.
It makes it so there are 2 people instead of 1. So I guess we'll get into the Syria story because I already did the brunt of the research and laying things out with this TikTok video here. But what I want to talk about is what the top comment is on this TikTok video right now, because the video is me breaking down the OPCW scandal in pretty good depth. In depth, by TikTok standards. Most of these videos are less than a minute. So I lay out a lot of sources and a lot of evidence that the OPCW pushed the narrative that Assad used chemical gas attacks in order to provide the justification for launching missiles at Syria. And yeah, we'll talk about the comments after we play the video, I guess. Oops. Gotta turn the sound on. What you're looking at here are missiles being launched at Syria by the United States and their allies in 2018, which was supposedly in response to a report from the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which said that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad used chemical gas on his own people. Then President Donald Trump was praised by the corporate media for these actions, including one of his harshest critics, Fareed Zakaria, who said that Trump launching those missiles was the moment he became president, arguing that Trump realized on that day sometimes you need to take military action against other countries without getting congressional approval first. However, a year later in 2019, WikiLeaks released documents showing that the OPCW report, which was used to justify the Syrian missile strikes, may have been doctored doctored in order to omit key evidence and push the U.S. State Department narrative that Assad was using chlorine gas on civilians. Additionally, any evidence suggesting that the attack could have been staged by U.S.-backed insurgents was removed from the report. And if that wasn't bad enough, two senior officials at the OPCW who were part of the chemical gas investigation in Douma, Syria, came forward as whistleblowers. The first whistleblower said that the OPCW report claimed that the chlorine gas canisters were dropped by helicopters. However, the evidence showed that the canisters were likely placed there by hand. The second whistleblower who came forward was in charge of investigating the air quality for evidence of chlorine gas use. He said that samples of the dirt and water in the surrounding area were sent into an OPCW lab for tests. However, the result of these tests were covered up by OPCW executives and management. And this is because those tests ultimately showed that there was less chlorine gas present than what would be considered average. And if there was a chlorine gas attack that happened, you would expect those numbers to be much, much higher. So the whistleblower's claim suggests that the OPCW higher-ups were purposefully covering up evidence that goes against the narrative that Assad was using chemical gas on his own people, which of course was the evidence that the US and their propagandists used to justify launching missiles at Syria. And rather than take serious the claims of the OPCW whistleblowers and launch an investigation in response, they were instead smeared as puppets of Bashar al-Assad and the Russian government. It couldn't be that they were telling the truth, they just wanted to cover up Assad's war crimes for some reason. Even though both whistleblowers had been with the OPCW for years and years and nothing like this had ever happened before. Apparently, they just woke up one day and decided to become puppets of Assad. It's funny how, according to American media, everybody who criticizes U.S. foreign policy is a puppet of Assad or Putin or some dictator. It almost seems like the U.S. is full of shit. So that's my video. Pretty in-depth for a TikTok, and I'll let Noah comment on it and share what he thinks. But here's the top comment right now on this video. Born and raised in Syria, and I can assure you Assad has indeed used chemical weapons. So ignore all the evidence I brought forward. Ignore all this documentation about the OPCW cover-up that I brought forward. And just say, I'm from Syria, and therefore I'm right. Weaponize your identity, as if, and I want to say to this person, there are a lot of people who say that the election in 2016 was stolen from Hillary Clinton by Russia, right? Are those people correct just because they're Americans? There are a lot of people who think that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump. Are they correct simply because they're Americans? No, identity does not trump evidence, but this is a really powerful argument. So if you don't mind, if you have a TikTok account, go ahead and go to this page and leave a positive comment, because right now it's getting a lot of views and likes, but not a ton of comments. Leave a positive comment and maybe politely inform this person that they need to present some evidence of the huge claim that Bashar al-Assad is using chemical weapons besides their own identity.
And I've seen a million comments like that on things.
Yes.
And I'm like a little tinfoil hattie, but my mind almost always goes to bots, trolls, etc.
Yes.
But even if it's not, I got into something of a friendly debate with an acquaintance about the same thing regarding Puerto Rican statehood the other day, and it's the same thing. Someone chimes in like, oh, I'm from Puerto Rico and what you're saying isn't true. It's like, well, tell me why rather than where you're from, right? I'm from Ohio. If I tell you that in Ohio we have flying alligators, do you have to listen to me because I'm from Ohio? Flying alligators are still flying alligators, right? But regarding, maybe it's the speed of how much information gets thrown at us all the time. But the OPCW whistleblowers were like sort of out of my head for a while, and this puts it back in there. It's always good to keep everything in context to remember that they use the same tactics over and over and over again when they build these narratives. Everybody is some sort of puppet. Anything they can do to deflect attention away from the actual substance, that is what they will do. So, oh, you're just an Assadist. The discussion then becomes about Assad rather than the chemical weapons attack. And they do the same thing now with the proxy war, right? With you're just, Putin puppets, or you're parroting Russian propaganda. Okay, maybe it is Russian propaganda, but is it correct? That's, oh, my cat is coming up and saying hi.
Exactly. I mean, you can put the shoe on the other foot. Be like, are you puppets of the U.S.-backed insurgent groups in Syria? Are you puppets of the U.S. State Department and the terrorists that they're arming?
Or are you puppets of CNN or, whatever giant holding corporation we're talking about, Clear Channel or whatever,
Right. Speaking of CNN, here's that video of Fareed Zakaria. This is quite ridiculous. This was out of my mind for a while. I mean, Aaron Mate is really the one who spearheaded all this great journalism on the OPCW whistleblowers and the cover-up. He presented his findings to the United Nations. But this is Fareed Zakaria, Trump enemy number one after Trump launched missiles at Syria. And Zakaria had done nothing but criticize Trump for the first 2 years of his presidency. Not legitimate, substantial criticisms like stop sanctioning Venezuela, Cuba, and Iran, but stupid, nitpicky, liberal criticisms. But then this was his reaction to Trump launching rockets at another country, which we now know was justified by lies.
Fareed, it's day 78 of the Trump presidency. What changed last night?
I think Donald Trump became president of the United States. I think this was actually a big moment because candidate Trump had said that he would never get involved in the Syrian civil war. He told President Obama, you cannot do this without the authorization of Congress. He seemed unconcerned with global norms. President Trump recognized that the president of the United States does have to act to enforce international norms, does have to have this broader moral and political purpose. President Trump realized, as every president has for many decades now, that presidents always believe they have inherent legal authority as commander-in-chief, and they don't need to go to a pesky Congress every time they want military force. It's entirely true that candidate Trump felt differently. Candidate Obama felt differently than President Obama on these issues. So I think that what is interesting is even the way in which he justified his actions, President Trump did. For the first time, really, as president, he talked about international norms, international rules, about America's role in enforcing justice in the world. It was the kind of rhetoric that we have come to expect from American presidents since Harry Truman, but it was the kind of rhetoric that President Trump had pointedly never used, either on the campaign trail nor in his inaugural. So I think there has been an interesting morphing and a kind of edge.
It's so interesting. This is the moment Donald Trump became president because he started acting like all the other imperialist presidents.
You know what's funny? They talk about how he sounded different. He never talked like this before. He sounded like a typical neocon. And I mean, he's not wrong. That's the day the neocon thing just came through out of Trump. He was always the same person, and all of these institutions were always going to act in this same way. But when he says this is when he becomes president, bombing another country for no good reason based on what were already known to be lies. That's true. You know, he did become president then. It's just that's not a positive.
Right. It's literally he's saying, you know, all these presidents railed against illegal wars and attacking countries without congressional approval and doing so just to uphold international norms, meaning U.S. hegemony, you know, and now Trump is really president because he's going back on his campaign promises and launching missiles at people. Like, this is the problem that liberals have with Trump. It's that he's not pro-establishment enough. He's not hawkish enough. And he's not pro-war enough. And whenever he did something hawkish as president, they would give him praise. and whenever he didn't is when they would most viciously attack him. So this is what, this is a perfect example that Trump is not the problem. He is a symptom. He is a symptom of capitalist imperialism in decay, right? But the system attacks Trump for not being pro-war, right? The system is pro-war. The system is pro-exploitation. The system is pro-homelessness and starvation and overwork and all of these terrible things that we recognize about capitalism, right? Trump didn't create those things. The system created Trump because people desperately wanted an anti-establishment candidate who actually was going to follow through on these campaign promises and brings jobs back rather than using all our tax money to bomb Syrian children.
Yeah, I mean, even so, as anyone who's seen our live streams with me before knows, I basically convince everybody I work with of the need for socialism. It's kind of a thing I do. But this is one of the things I tell them to get them sort of out of the Trump demagoguery, right? And I mean, I don't like blame anybody for getting wrapped up in that, but I talked to him like, dude, when it came down to it, Trump was just another Obama. And this is one of the things I bring up. When he bombed Syria for no good reason, right? Just bombed them. Well, for a good reason for our ruling class, not for us, right? I bring up how he just did the work of the big banks like Obama. And what people really focus on, what any sort of political discussion with someone coming from that sort of viewpoint, they're going to look for you to say every lefty cliche. And when you sort of condemn Trump and Obama as the same thing, they generally haven't heard that before. And so they can't immediately dismiss it. They need to actually consider it.
That's a really good point. That's why, I mean, Trump derangement syndrome is really dangerous for Marxists. And finally, it seems like the most people who are real committed Marxists are finally starting to see through that and realizing that, Russiagate was nonsense and Trump derangement syndrome is harmful. And we have to view Trump as a symptom, as something that the system produced, and have to understand why so many American workers voted for him or took a chance on him, and including a lot of them who voted for Obama twice. It's because a lot of them like that anti-war, anti-establishment rhetoric. But for those who don't know, now in Syria, the U.S. is occupying 1/3 of it, and look at the third we're occupying. The black here is the Syrian oil fields. So we're just coincidentally occupying the oil field parts of Syria for freedom and democracy, of course.
Right. Always for freedom and democracy. It's like no matter which sort of faction we're talking about, it's always for some form of freedom and democracy. They even call it decolonization these days sometimes, right? Like they'll talk about decolonizing China and decolonizing Russia. It's the same thing that the sort of PNAC refers to as promoting democracy, or the Project for a New American Century is what I'm talking about, the neocon plan, which is still going on, right? It's just neoconservatism with different rhetoric. That's all BreadTube is. That's all half the ultra lefts are. That's all it is. If materially speaking, your rhetoric does not directly challenge and combat the ruling class and its plans, if you have some revolutionary sounding phraseology, but the concrete end result is what these neoconservatives want, guess what? Materially speaking, you're a neocon, right? You're not any different because you're saying the word dialectics and misusing the name communist,
And sometimes what liberals didn't like about Trump is that he would pull the mask off of empire. he would say out loud what the neoliberals want to do in secret. So like Dust said here, Trump said he turned the Middle East into glass. Yeah, he would say stuff like that all the time. He'd be like, we can't stop funding the genocide in Yemen. Then the Saudis might stop giving us oil. And, for the neoliberals and the managers of empire like Obama, they're like, what the hell, dude? Don't just tell them that. Don't just give away the game. But Trump would kind of just, admit the terrible stuff that the U.S. wanted to do abroad a lot of the time. So that's another thing that liberals don't like about him. Thank you so much for the 10 Canadian dollars, comrade. Used to live in Iowa, back in Canada now, but I wish I met people like you in the States. Well, we're growing, comrade. We are growing. There's more and more of us every day. We're getting to the regular working people of this country and helping to flush their minds of the propaganda and anti-communist garbage they've been indoctrinated with. So thank you so much for giving us $10 to continue that mission.
I'm going to break my no swearing rule and just add fuck yeah.
I like it. How to respond to the claim of 25 bazillion people dead because of communism in a simple way. I would say, well, first of all, if they cite, ask them to cite their source. And if it's the Black Book of Communism, that the book's own authors admitted it wasn't true and said one of the authors was committed to reaching a certain number. I can't remember what it was, like 100 million or something. And of course, the book was CIA and State Department backed. But also, ask if we're going to do death count economics, how many people has capitalism killed? How many people has capitalism starved to death? There's 1 million people starving every year. Plus, you have the great, Irish famines, Indian famines, too many famines to count. Many under capitalism that haven't even been counted or have just been ignored. You have the deaths of colonialism. You have the deaths of U.S. imperialism and U.S. wars. All the deaths of World War I and II, which were imperialist conflicts. Capitalism has killed far more people than socialist systems ever have, and it's not even close.
Yeah, you just got to put it in context, like Eddie says. What I like to do is go look first at where are you getting this from, right? That Black Book of Communism, even setting aside all the lies, the math errors, like decimal plates placed the wrong ways. You know what they actually use to get those numbers, right? They use invading Nazis that were killed by the Red Army or people defending their villages and cities. They use babies that they think would have been conceived otherwise if it weren't wartime. They use all kinds of ridiculous statistics. But what I do is I put it in perspective and I go, okay, what they're trying to do, that's a media narrative, right? And they want you to focus on all these bad things and say communism did that. When you think of capitalism, do you think, wait, we can't try capitalism or we'll get chattel slavery? You don't think, wait, we can't try capitalism or we'll get the Great Depression. You don't think, wait, we can't try capitalism or we'll get the consolidation of monopolies, right? It's the way we're trained to think about these things that's the issue. And so you can take them into any subject as long as you keep it in context. I mean, it's not like the Soviet Union was perfect. They made mistakes. The famines at the very beginning are real, and it was a tragedy. But it's not because of communism. We can look into the actual substantive reason of why these things happen. There's a great famine expert, Mark Tauger, and he's an American. He's not a communist or nothing, that has like sort of the defining study on that specific famine, the 32 famine in Volga. So just there's any number of areas you can go to.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember this is funny. And anyone who's really researched or dug into the Holodomor or the Great Leap Forward, you know how bad the Western scholarship is on it. But for our video on the construction of modern China, which is one of the more popular videos that we've done on the YouTube channel, I looked into the way they were counting up deaths for the Great Leap Forward, and they get to some ridiculous number, like 18 million people or something. And like the way the data extrapolation that they do, like Noah said, you know, like here's the population from year to year, you know, therefore we can assume this many people were killed in camps. It's like, wait, what? Where are you getting that from? They just fabricate things using birth statistics and really give no explanation whatsoever for these, you know, huge numbers of people who they assume were killed by communism. It's terrible scholarship. And you see that in the work of someone like Mark Tauger, who's done a lot of work on the Holodomor, because he's gone through the scholarship of people like Ann Applebaum, who have been the scholars that push the Holodomor myth. And it's just absurd that, you know, the way they carry out their data analysis and these extrapolations from data to do death counts is just ridiculous and completely unscientific and completely unrigorous, which is also what a lot of people say about the OPCW report on Syria, the first one that came out. Like, it's interesting, you know, when you have people who are non-ideological but are rigorous scientists or are legitimate academics, when they look at the work of the imperialists and the imperialist academics, they're like, what the hell? What is this?
Well, and you know, that makes me think of another really good way to approach all of the like communism killed a billion people things. If it's say like a conservative, you go, okay, do you trust the media? And of course they're going to say no, right? So you go, why will we trust the media from a few years ago? You see what they say about your boy Trump. Why do you think they're not doing that about other leaders, right? Why do you think they're not doing that, especially about the leaders that stop all of their wars? If you look up who vetoed all of these attempted like our ruling class wanting to invade people in the beginning of the UN and the Security Council, there's like something like the first 60 things were the Soviet Union vetoing an American intervention. So of course they're going to spin and make up narratives and lies. That's just what they do. And if you sort of go from that angle of their own media skepticism they already have, that can kind of get your foot in the door a little.
For sure. Let's jump into the oh, we got another super chat here. I'll answer this before we jump into the next segment. Every time a socialist tries to explain the Ukrainian war, they say Russia started the war, so all the history of NATO being imperialist is invalid. Thank you so much for the $5 super check, Grape Juice. Yeah, that's the other thing they do. And Marx even talks about this in the German ideology, but they isolate events from their historical context and from the preconditions that, you know, created the possibility for those events to exist. So the, you know, historical events that led to the Russian invasion were, of course, the U.S.-led coup in 2014, where neo-Nazis and ethno-nationalist groups hijacked the Ukrainian protests and toppled the sovereign democratically elected government, which kicked off the war in the Donbass, which was a war that took place for about 7.5 years before the Russian intervention. That was basically a civil war between Eastern Ukrainians in the Donbass region, who largely saw themselves as culturally and ethnically Russian, many of whom spoke Russian, versus the extremist groups that were now being added to Ukraine's actual military forces, as the government was passing laws like anti-Russian language laws and laws against Russian culture. So there was a civil war that went on for years before Russia ever invaded. But where does every American news outlet start their narrative about the war from? From the Russian invasion, Russia's unprovoked and illegal invasion, where Putin just woke up one day and decided to become a Russian czar and reestablish the Russian Empire and invade Ukraine or whatever they accuse him of. So they isolate the event from the historical conditions that allowed the event to exist so that they can push a nonsensical narrative, a mythical narrative about it.
One of the ways you can know when they're doing that or when they're lying is when the reasons they give would mean they can read people's minds. So they say Putin invades because he's a psychopath and just wants to conquer If you can show me a single Putin speech where he says that, I will eat my hat. Because you can't. They're reading his mind, right? It's like, it reminds me, and the way they divorce it from all history and context, reminds me of a while ago, I was researching a bunch of slave revolts here in the U.S., right? And a lot of the white supremacists, which was the majority of the ruling class at the time, were doing the exact same thing. They were talking about these slaves who would murder white people, right? What they didn't tell you is they were the people that owned them, that, you know, these people would torture them, literally own them as property, and then to get away, they end up killing somebody. All of that history that leads to this person killing this slave owner is gone, and so they can sort of present it as these wild, out of control people who were subhuman, just absurdly, disgustingly racist stuff. But it's the same exact logic that they use for everything now, because it's the bourgeois mode of thought, and they need to say something to try to rationalize it morally.
Exactly. They could make John Brown seem like a villain, right? They would isolate the historical. Right. Yeah, I'm sure they did. Right. Just isolate it from its historical context, and, you know, make it so it wasn't him waging a war against slavery and slave owners, but him just being a murderer, and then psychoanalyze him like they do with Putin and Assad or whoever they're trying to boogeyman, you know, say John Brown was just a religious extremist. He was just craving violence, blah, blah, blah. Nothing that John Brown ever said, but you just assume he said it, and do some kind of liberal psychoanalysis of him. That's what they do with everyone.
That's exactly what they said about John Brown. They said he was a psychotic religious extremist. What he was saying in his religion was actually just the same stuff that the Shakers had been saying for a very long time.
My buddy, this is one of my
I met him once.
college. Yeah. This is one of my college wrestling teammates.
I met him once, and someone commented on our voices being similar. But I was playing in a band, right? And we were on tour in Columbus, Ohio. And Jackass on tour was in the same city, and they came to that show to see the band we were opening up for, right? And so him and Johnny Knoxville are just chilling at the bar, and there's this line of people in line to talk to him, right? And so I stand in this line, just like, I was stupid. I was kind of drunk at the time. I was like, oh, isn't this funny, standing in line to talk to people? But then when I actually got up there, I realized I had nothing to say to these people, right? Like, I don't know them. I don't watch Jackass. Oh, shit. Anyway, I dropped my pen. And so I get up there, and I'm like, oh, hey, Johnny Knoxville, you're not that funny, right? And Steve-O thought that was hilarious, and we hung out and had a couple beers together after that. It was good. It was a good time.
Story time with Noah, new segment. All right, let's talk about our favorite incel / red pill streamer. This headline did Sneeko so dirty. It said incel influencer Sneeko's young fans yell all gays should die in a viral video. But for those who didn't see this, yes, this happened. And Sneeko used to be like a gaming streamer or whatever. I don't know what he did, but he took a hard turn into being like a red pill guy, it's kind of like Aiden Ross, where you have these streamers who are just like the least masculine people imaginable, who are trying to be like red pill guys now and are just filling their young audience's brains with nonsense. So Sneeko's young fans came up and talked to him recently in public, and he got a taste of what he's actually putting out in the world. So check this out.
What'd you take? Fuck the woman! Fuck the woman! What? No, wait. We love women. We love women. We love women. But not like transgenders.
Yes, sir.
We love everybody. No, no.
All gays should die.
Yeah, Marx, preach.
What have I done?
What have I done? Oh my gosh. Who knew
good
that
question.
saying all
What
this
is he-
hateful rhetoric on stream for months straight in front of millions of people was influencing them? Oh my gosh. Who could have seen this coming?
You know, I'm a big sort of free speech and parent your kids the way you want rather than having other people tell you. But this really makes me understand the Chinese law that limits the internet activity of minors and their gaming activity. Because this is ridiculous. And a lot of the times people don't know what their kids are watching or that they would say something like this, right? Especially at that age. My son is right now 13, and believe me, some of the shit I've seen that he didn't think I would is it's an issue, right? Because kids are really, really easily influenced at that age. And if they're watching something like this, is sort of ridiculous. Like I'm sorry, but look at this guy, right? He doesn't seem like someone that should be looked up to. And knowing what we know of him, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little flustered with it. It's just, there needs to be some sort of way to combat this, right?
That's why I wanted to pull up the video, because I think this shows the importance of the kind of work we're doing online, and especially on TikTok. Because if you don't offer kids an alternative anti-establishment ideology to the red pill ideology, this is the only option they have, and this is what they turn to. Because when Andrew Tate or Sneeko or these people talk, they criticize the establishment, right? They criticize the ruling class, the matrix, the system. But then their solution is like, look, the ruling class is woke. The liberal ruling class is woke, so you should be anti-woke, right? They say, they talk about gay people all the time. You should take the opposite position. You should hate the gays. And it just pushes them into this contrarian, hateful ideology. That's basically what the red pill is. But it's attractive to a lot of kids because a lot of kids realize that the system is bunk, right? That the system is screwing their parents over, that the system, it does work kind of like a matrix that traps you in it and forces you to just work and work and work, and makes it hard to break out of that. So it's an attractive ideology, especially for young people who don't know any better. But the solution to it is to offer kids an alternative, you know, and offer them a positive virtue ethic, as Carlos would say, and be like, no, you can, you know, be virtuous, and be a good person and be a stand-up masculine person, but you don't have to be a piece of shit. You don't have to hate entire groups of people. And yes, the establishment and the system are screwing you over. It is like a matrix that traps you and exploits you and alienates you and makes you sad and doesn't let you chase your dreams. The answer is to look at the system that we have and understand what's wrong with it. Our system is a capitalist system. It's a capitalist mode of production that's based on the exploitation of wage laborers by the capitalist class. So the solution to that is socialism, is to struggle against the ruling capitalist class, smash that so that we can build our own system, a system that serves and works for the working class, the working masses, right? The solution isn't to yell, I hate gay people, F women. This is just the mirror of wokeism, right? It's nothing but, the red pill ideology is nothing but identity politics. Our solution for our culture's obsession with identity politics is to talk more about identity politics, is to take contrarian identity politics positions. You're not helping anything.
Yeah, so it seems to me to be a result of, all of it is a result of reproletarianization, right? Our society is deteriorating, and all of the people entering the workforce right now are cut off from what used to be an ability to enter the middle classes. That ability is gone now. And what this creates is not just radicalization and reproletarianization, but politics as fashion. It is seen as cool to know what's going on in society, or at least to seem like you know what's going on in society. And so that creates both the fake left and these sort of, it's both like they're both forms of what Carlos calls controlled counter hegemony, right? It's very manufactured. It's a brand name that is purposely pumped forward in the algorithm so that this is what people see, so that they do not see a real solution to the actual problems, so that they don't see us, so that they don't see Marxism and learning how to genuinely solve the problem. So you get the sort of cultural left of the middle class and the cultural right of the middle class as it's reproletarianizing, all fighting over these issues that don't need to be issues. There is no reason this kid should have been led to a place where he says death to all gays. That is fucking crazy, right? But this guy and people like him are so convincing that gays are somehow the problem. And then on the other side, the controlled left, that people who hate gays are somehow the problem, that they're all sort of proliferated, right? And this is what you get. And this is why it takes more than just understanding society, right? It takes more than just learning Marxism. If it were just learning Marxism, I mean, me and Eddie would have met, right? Because what it takes in the internet era is building an institution that can somehow figure out a way to overcome all the bullshit. Because you know how Andrew Tate uses the matrix. Andrew Tate is the matrix, right? So to actually smash that matrix, it's important to understand what it genuinely is. So you need to be able to have an institution that presents that real solution by showing the fakes, by showing the frauds. And then from there, you need a way to proliferate that instead. I'm sorry I've been ranted, but for some reason that just got me heated as all get out all of a sudden. I apologize.
No, you're good. Good. I agree with what you said. We need to get our message out there in the social media era. Apparently, Aiden Ross is interviewing Kim Jong-un soon. That cannot be true.
Real.
If Kim Jong-un knows who Aiden Ross is and what he acts like and his personality, there's no way that's true. Aiden Ross's streams are probably banned in the DPRK, rightfully so. Hopefully they're banned in China too. That's I remember when China banned or didn't ban, but they limited online gaming to like 3 hours a day, and all these leftists were like defending China by saying, that's just online games. You'll still allowed to be able to play other games. I'm like, wait a second. Are we defending playing 4+ hours of video games a day? Like,
a lot of video games.
That's
man.
so much games, dude. I'm like, I think we should just be okay with them limiting gaming to 3 hours a day for kids. I mean, that sounds like an appropriate amount of time.
It sounds like a lot. Like, I like to play video games with my son. We're playing Starfield right now. It's telling Eddie about how fun that game is before. But dude, sitting there for 3 hours, that's a long time. That is a long time to be doing nothing productive.
Right. Yeah. There's just other things to do with your time. I mean, video games are a good way to blow off steam and stuff. But Battle Cossack, thank you so much for the Argentinian super chats. Those are Black Ops 2 kids. This gaming culture is nothing new. I was once playing Battlefront 2 and one guy was raging. Yeah, no, there's always been a lot of racism in the online gaming community. And now it's like there's a big fascism problem with a lot of these online games. And there's like these fascist Discord servers and pockets of the gaming community. Like with the Warhammer community is a big one. There's like a large presence of fascists. And I see them on TikTok, and Lady Izdahar has been pointing those kind of accounts out lately and calling them out on TikTok because people like me have been banned 7 times, right? And she's constantly having her videos get pulled down or have, bots come and attack her and hate on her. And it's like she's just a communist, and everything she says is from a scholarly place and well-sourced and well-researched. And then you have these giant like fascist meme accounts with the double lightning bolts in their bio, and TikTok's not only refusing to take them down, but their content is blowing up.
Because not only does it lead kids in that wrong direction, but it also creates a problem that isn't the ruling class for people, right? They can rail against that, like Battle Cossack was just saying, right? That's what the sort of wokeism does. They rail on these cultural issues.
Yes. All right, let's get to our final segment for today. I'm super pumped about this. We're going to get into some conspiracy talk. 9/11, the 3 towers, not just the Twin Towers, 2 towers. We're going to be talking about Tower 7 today, which of course fell around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the same day that Towers 1 and 2 of the World Trade Center fell after being hit by planes. Tower 7 was never hit by a plane, though, and it still fell. The explanation given was that debris falling from the other 2 towers started office fires, which then raged all day in Tower 7. Causing one of the structures, one of the beams to expand through a process of what they call thermal expansion, which then caused the building to collapse in on its own footprint. That was the explanation that was given by NIST. I can't remember exactly what NIST stands for, but they were contracted by the government to carry out a study of Tower 7, and that is what they came up with. Of course, a little background. I'm sure most of you know this, but 9/11 was used as the justification to invade Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003. The leader of Iraq's government at the time was Saddam Hussein, who was an enemy of Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, who carried out the 9/11 terrorist attacks, as were the Taliban, who were in charge of the Afghani government at the time. So we invaded 2 countries using 9/11 as the pretext, who had nothing to do with 9/11 and killed millions of civilians.
And it sort of it's a good comment on the latent inherent racism of our ruling class and how its institutions can sort of let that fly under the radar. That in the heads of Americans, all these people could become the same. Now, that's not saying all these Americans are inherently racist, but that we were led to think in this direction on purpose, right? To not differentiate between Iraq and Afghanistan, to not differentiate between Iraq and Iran, right? And to look at them all as somehow similar, that a terrorist organization based in one country could somehow justify invading a completely separate country.
And that terrorist organization was a splinter group of the Mujahideen, who the U.S. had been heavily funding through the 80s and 90s because they were fighting the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. So not only did they not want you to differentiate the different countries, but different groups within those countries. They wanted you to lump them all together as this big, scary, jihadist, extremist group of terrorist countries, which is why at the time of 9/11, there were a lot of people saying, just nuke them all, just nuke the whole Middle East. That was something you would hear George W. Bush supporters say a lot. And there was a study done in 2011, I believe, that found 33% of Republicans and about 15% of Democrats were in favor of bombing Agrabah. And if you don't know, Agrabah is the fictional city from the Disney movie Aladdin. So they had people so brainwashed into hating Middle Eastern countries that people were willing to bomb Agrabah, a country that sounds Middle Eastern or sounds Muslim. So that kind of gives you an idea of how the propaganda worked and how strong it was. Now, there was a documentary that came out about Tower 7 that focuses on Leroy Halsey, who is a professor in Anchorage, Alaska, a professor of structural engineering, and he did a structural revaluation of Tower 7. So he did his own analysis of Tower 7, ran his own simulations of Tower 7. This is all peer-reviewed scholarly work that he was doing with other PhD students at the university in Anchorage. And they also did a revaluation of the NIST reports. So the reports that came out from the government, they went through with a fine-tooth comb and saw if they could find any problems with their findings. Now, this movie 7 is kind of hard to find because YouTube has buried it, but you can definitely find it if you Google it. So I'm going to play a couple clips from that. I believe this first clip is the government hauling off all of the debris from Tower 7 immediately after the tower fell and shipping it overseas, which then made the work of structural engineers much, much harder.
Real quick, I just want to say before we get to that, when you talk about how brainwashed people were, that is just so visceral for me. I lived in Pittsburgh at the time. And I was very friendly with the owners of a little grocery store a couple blocks from my house, who happened to be Syrian, right? Nothing to do with anybody over there or even any of these countries. But every single week, their windows were getting broken. Every single week. Graffiti all over with racial slurs. It was disgusting, and there were so many attacks, and it was, I'm sorry, I don't mean to sidetrack us, but yeah, it was really, really a messed up time.
Yeah, and that was showed in statistics too. There was the amount of Muslim hate crimes went up, similar to how anti-Asian hate crimes are going up now with all the anti-China propaganda. But again, here's the movie 7, and this is them hauling off the debris, which there was no reason to do. It was actually illegal for them to haul off debris the way that they did before it could be investigated by scientists and by engineers. And there was no reason to do so because nobody was in Tower 7 when it collapsed, right? So it's not like they had to rush in and rescue people, yet they rushed in and started hauling off all of the debris. Why?
Building 7 was a structural anomaly that merited an exhaustive investigation. The debris was quickly shipped away from the site.
You know, typically, let's say if you have an airplane disaster, you have the FAA and the investigators gathering every little piece of that plane and piecing it back together.
There's a generic procedure that you should follow. And one of the first things that you want to do is save the evidence.
Building 7 did not require the immediate search and rescue operation that the Twin Towers did. Building 7 didn't come down until 5:20 in the afternoon, and there was nobody in the building, by all accounts. That destruction of the evidence actually...
So there's literally them hauling off the debris, which they then shipped overseas. Nothing sketchy, nothing to see here.
Amounts to a federal crime. You can't tamper with the evidence at a crime scene. There was quick decisions made about taking that evidence away.
Building 7 was no ordinary office building. It housed offices of the Department of Defense, CIA, IRS, and Secret Service.
So a lot of people ask what would be the point of them blowing building 7 if nobody was in there. Well, it could have been to hide certain information. And, you know, a lot of people have suggested that if there was something fishy going on 9/11 with the other towers, maybe they were running that operation out of Building 7. And then they just wanted to demolish Building 7 to do away with all the evidence. So there's a lot of theories, but very fishy that you had all these government organizations based there.
It also held files related to numerous Wall Street investigations, many of which were not backed up elsewhere. Controversy started revolving around Building 7 and its collapse.
People just need to look at the whole reason that we got into this fiasco, 9/11, and ask themselves.
So that's the first clip from 7. And one sec, what am I going to go? Oh, yeah. So Leroy Halsey, this engineer from Anchorage, Alaska, in his structural revaluation, which we're going to look at in a second, he basically found that there was no way to confirm the NIST reports, that the NIST reports had jumped to conclusions in order to find a neat and tidy way to say that Building 7 fell due to office fires and there was no foul play. But as we're going to see with Halsey's study in a second, there's almost no way that the building would have fallen the way it did if it was what NIST said it was, a progressive collapse caused by office fires, which led to thermal expansion. So here's some engineers talking about Halsey's study and the way that it was completely ignored by NIST.
The findings that we have got, we're very comfortable with. It's based on sound science. It's consistent with the observations. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's elegant, technical. It's understandable by people. And we looked at, as I said, all of the alternative theories that were presented, there were only few that rose to be credible in our technical judgment. When we see evidence that in fact you have robust science behind alternative theories, we will look at them.
Okay, any more questions?
The draft report of Professor Halsey's study was released for public comment in September 2019, 4 exhausting years later.
Well, you know, I'm a perfectionist. I'm very satisfied with what we found. The thing that threw me for a loop is that I thought surely the progressive collapse and the collapse understanding would have been more clear. We spent almost a year on that issue alone. So that was a surprise to me. I didn't expect that to be the case.
How much has changed between the draft report that we're scrolling through right now and what the final report will be?
Hardly any.
Really?
Not much. A few little things here and there, but for the most part, it's not significant. So pretty pleased about that.
They went through every single one of the components, the initiating events, the beam failures, the column failures, and then of course the entire building failure. And every one of those events was impossible to show to make the building collapse the way it came down. It was impossible. And he uncovered that if you do actually cause all these elements within the building to collapse, what's going to happen? The NIST model shows the building crumpling, as we had talked about. Going further there, what happens after that is that the building actually leans to one side and does not disintegrate and collapse into its footprint.
There was no reason for anyone to think that World Trade Center 7, with the fires that were in it, was going to collapse at all. Now that we have the Halsey report, we know that every column in the building needed to fail almost simultaneously for the building to fall in the manner that it did.
Professor Halsey's final conclusions regarding Building 7 are as follows. The principal conclusion of our study is that fire did not cause the collapse of WTC-7 on 9/11, contrary to the conclusions of NIST and private engineering firms that studied the collapse. The secondary conclusion of our study is that the collapse of WTC-7 was a global failure involving the near simultaneous failure of every column in the building. The simultaneous failure of all core columns over 8 stories, followed 1.3 seconds later by the simultaneous failure of all exterior columns over 8 stories, produces almost exactly the behavior observed in videos of the collapse, whereas no other sequence of failures that we simulated produced the observed behavior.
So what does that really tell you? It really tells you that all those interior columns came out at once. At once. The exteriors also, a few seconds later, came out at once.
So what NIST said was a few office fires caused thermal expansion of the beams, which caused the tower to collapse in on itself. And what these guys are saying is that if it really was the office fires, for sure the building would have tipped over. And there's no way to simulate the building falling in on its own footprint like that unless you take out every interior beam in the building. And then 1.8 seconds later, you take out every exterior beam in the building all at once. That's the only way to get it to fall the way that it actually did. And then, of course, at the end of this documentary, they draw the comparison. Like, if you look at the other towers and the way they fell, they also fell into their own footprint, which raises some questions there. Obviously, we don't want to get into speculation, and we just want to look at what's been studied rigorously by the structural engineers, which is what we have here with Leroy Halsey's study. But it is very interesting. And, you know, this shouldn't be a topic that's considered off limits because we might get called conspiracy theorists, right? It needs to be subjected to rigorous analysis. Here is Dr. Halsey's study, if anybody wants to check it out. Here are the figures that they use. This is World Trade Center Tower 7 collapsing. There's a better video than this, but as you can see, it collapses straight down and on its footprint. Here is what the NIST report said happened, a progressive collapse, but Halsey's simulations, which they put the building into 2 different simulation software and then ran tests after test after test to see if they could get it to fall in on its footprint, but they couldn't. If what NIST said happened actually happened, the building would have tipped over like this. And here, I believe, is near simultaneous failure of all columns, and then the exterior columns 1.8 seconds later. That is the only way that you can get the simulations to fall in on their own footprint, is by taking out all the columns at once. So extremely interesting. Extremely interesting. Why did NIST lie? Why did they cover this up? Why did they do such sloppy science? Who knows? Why would there be reason what was the reason that they would pull this if it was a controlled demolition? Who knows? I mean, there are things that we can point to, like the DOD and CIA offices or the Wall Street crimes that were in that building, but we don't know for sure. What we do know is that the progressive collapse thermal expansion story that NIST gave us and the government gave us about Tower 7 is probably not true. And we do know that 9/11 was used as justification for 2 illegal wars that killed millions and millions of people. So getting to the truth is very important.
Not only that, think about the billions upon billions upon billions over the years, not just the direct profits resulting from these wars in the military industrial complex, etc., but all of the attached phenomena. Think about all of the other military adventures. Think about all of the reconstruction in all of these countries. In Iraq especially. I mean, Halliburton got busted for fixing contracts, right? And you hit on something a minute before this when you said we have to be careful not to be called we shouldn't be called conspiracy theorists for talking about this. The inaccuracy of the NIST report, for me, is evidence of, 1, how stupid they think we are, and 2, how much they trust their propaganda machine, which is still serving them to this day. When they create a narrative, they can extend it any way they want to, right? That narrative is there, and when you're outside, you can safely be called a conspiracy theorist. And then if you get a few people who act as a sort of ridiculous cartoon character that they can lump you in with, like how they talk about Alex Jones, even better. If there's some wildly zany theory about this, about how actually it was, the lizard people or aliens or whatever, then everybody who questions the official narrative can safely be lumped into that category and dismissed. The whole point is to stop us thinking.
I mean, that's literally been in the CIA playbook since Guatemala. Mm-hmm. When they were doing the coup in Guatemala, which backed an arm of the military led by Castillo Armas against Jacobo Arbenz, who wanted to redistribute some of the United Fruit Company land, they said anybody who says that the CIA was behind this is a conspiracy theorist, the same way everybody who says the NED and the U.S. were behind the 2014 coup in Ukraine are conspiracy theorists. It's a conspiracy theory, right? There are leaked CIA documents, or CIA officials have said that was their plan. That was what they were trying to do. That was their strategy: conflate criticism of the CIA with conspiracy theorism. And what's interesting is that Leroy Halsey's structural revaluation of Tower 7 has been largely ignored by the major engineering journals, by the major academic journals, which is the same bullcrap that Carlos and us deal with if we're trying to publish things on academic platforms. They'll only publish stuff that goes along with the mainstream narrative, and they don't want to touch something like this because it sounds like conspiracy talk, because you're going to get lumped in with Alex Jones. Meanwhile, these academic journals are willing to publish private engineering firms who are working with the government and have an obvious conflict of interest there. They're really sloppy analyses of what happened to Tower 7. So
with no review of their work, by the way.
Right.
No review.
It becomes more about towing the establishment line and not saying anything that sounds like it's out of bounds versus doing good scholarship.
Exactly. And by the way, with the our Benz affair, whose CIA was that? That was George H.W. Bush's CIA, wasn't it?
That would have been Jacobo Arbenz would have been 1954.
Oh, okay. So I'm off. My bad.
Yeah. You're thinking of Nicaragua, right? Or no? That would have been Reagan.
Yes, I think I am. I'm sorry. There's so many of these.
No, that's what I'm saying. It goes all the way back, because Guatemala, other than maybe the coup of Mossadegh, was like the CIA's very first coup.
I was
so
thinking
like
of
they've been doing it for
Panama,
70 years now.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking of Panama. My bad, guys.
Oh, yes. I mean, same type of thing. I mean, it's the same playbook they've used over and over and over again. They tweak it, but it's largely the same. So it makes sense that these things would get blurred in your mind. I mean, how many interventions have we done in Central America at this
point?
Like El Salvador, Panama, Grenada. It's out of control. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Jonah Koch. Appreciate it. When can we expect your Venezuelan Reproletariat book? Good question. I got to get my butt in gear and get working. I don't know, Noah. When do you think the Reproletarianization book will be done?
I've been so close to finishing the original pamphlet form but then like I get sidetracked and work on the book project, and then I get sidetracked and work on. I apologize. It is completely my fault. I'm a really busy guy. I do this along with working full time, with having a family, a wife, and a son, and my mom, who is 71, might be getting married again. So like, there's just all kinds of stuff going around my life. But yeah, that is, I guarantee you it will, at least the pamphlet and the theory itself will be out within the month.
The book is so good, y'all. You're going to love it. And yeah, I don't know how Noah finds time to do everything he does. It's pretty impressive. But and same, I'm less busy than Noah, to be honest, but I'm wrestling, coaching. Just started a new position, wrestling, and trying to get that off the ground, get myself as financially stable as we can be, so we can keep investing Midwestern Marks money in the super chats y'all are sending that we're so grateful for, in things like a new microphone for Noah, in a cooling pad for my laptop so we can do more gaming streams, stuff like that. So yeah, it'll be out. I'm not gonna give a time frame, but yeah, I have most of the research done. So,
speaking of gaming streams, y'all gotta get on Eddie to do this Baldur's Gate game with me.
Yeah, this actually sounds fun. It sounds like a game that's up my alley.
If you bug him enough, he'll do it. I promise.
True. If enough people ask for something, I got
it, and it's a fun game. I play video games mostly with my son. But I only played a little bit of this one because he was like, "Oh, you should play this one with Eddie," and I was like, "That's a good idea, Jack."
That sounds fun. Let's do it. Eddie Lagersmith Gaming and the Midwestern Marks Twitch, everybody. If you want to watch me and Noah give a political analysis or class analysis of Baldur's Gate. In reference to earlier, my hometown is a city where Marshall Islanders were moved following the Tesla atrocities. Same. That's so weird, Jake. I wonder if we're in the same place. I don't know. Are you in the Midwest? But I also live in a place where there are a bunch of Marshallese people, and my brother and roommate were educating me about it a little bit the other day, and I was reading up on it. It's quite crazy. Like, as sea levels are rising, the Marshall Islands are being swallowed up more and more. And of course, they're basically a colony of the West, and all they have to eat is like crappy processed food. So it's like they have like 60% obesity rates, and there's been all these atrocities enacted against them. And there's tons of migrants who live in my area, and there's a big problem with racism towards the Marshallese and towards the Marshallese working class. It's very interesting and sad, but little gets talked about. They immediately work at large corporations, but are leveraged as the problem all the time. Bingo. Yeah, exactly what I'm saying. It's between the working class. You know, they say, look at these fat Marshallese people, you know, sucking up the welfare and, you know, coming in and taking our jobs. They're taking our jobs. It's the same propaganda they give Midwest, or the racist propaganda they induce Midwestern workers with when it comes to Mexican immigrants or any kind of immigrants. But yeah, solidarity with the Marshallese people. Maybe a segment about that sometime would be worthwhile. They're our gerbs.
I'd be super into that. Someone else said that we should do a Marxist analysis of Red Dead Redemption 2. I played that game too. That game's itching for Marxist analysis, honestly. It's like right at the rise of industrial capitalism, and you play as like an outlaw as the era of outlaws, and that way of life is ending. And there's even, so this is also alongside the Paris Commune happening, and there's even a spot where like the leader of your gang, you suggest leaving the country, he's like, oh, that'd be great, we could go to Paris and join the commune. It's kind of funny.
That's awesome. I've heard the story in that game's awesome.
It is. It's very good.
Cry.
They took your job.
Did you know though?
Yeah, they're down. Took our job. They did. They took our job. They took your job. They took your job too. They took our job. They took your job. They took your job.
But then the people from the future came along, and now we're out of work too. Oh, they took our jobs.
They took your jobs.
It's one of the most pertinent South Park episodes I've ever seen. The anti-immigrant racism that Fox News tries to push on the Southern and Midwestern working class is real, and it's big barrier to class struggle.
You know, and it's crazy because it's so easily dispelled too. I do it all the time at work. You would be surprised how many of my coworkers were incredibly anti-immigrant. And then over a while, just talking to them like regular people, convince them otherwise, because it's very easy to just go, man, you would never leave your home unless something forced you to, right? You love your town, you love your country, you want what's best for the people, your family, everybody. So what would make you leave? And there you go, because people from any other country generally aren't coming here because it looks like a nice place. They're coming here because they have no other option.
Exactly.
They have been, their country has been destroyed by our ruling class. And guess what? That's that same ruling class that's destroying our towns, right? Meaning all of us are in the same boat. And we can also sort of parlay that into, if we work together with workers, no matter where they're from, against that ruling class, rather than letting them pit us against each other, then we stand a much better chance of winning that fight. And what's good for them is good for us as workers.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Why not set up an Amazon wish list for the Institute? That's actually a good idea. Maybe we will. Can people buy you stuff if you have a wish list? Just like prompt our audience to just start buying stuff for us.
Just put all our books on it.
Yeah, right. That's our whole wish list. We need an Amazon affiliate link so people can do their Amazon shopping and get Midwestern Marks paid with Bezos money. Let me get in on that Baldur's Gate co-op party. Definitely. Let's run it. I'm looking at the game right now. It seems kind of cool. So play HOI4 or OH2 as Cuba. Oh, Hearts of Iron. Dude, I'm so bad at those grand strategy games. They're over my head, but maybe they're helpful for learning how to centrally plan an economy. But well, anything else you wanted to discuss today, Noah? We made it through all our segments.
No, brother. I think this was great. I had a great time. It's always cool getting off work early, number one. Then if I could come and do this, even better, you know?
Hell yeah. I'm glad you were able to join. This was fun. Always better than streaming alone. So, yeah, appreciate you joining us. And thank you to everybody who sent super chats. Thank you to all our Patreon supporters, everybody in the Discord. Thank you to our moderators, Ware Pilgrim, Cobra Commander, and Jacob on Twitch. Appreciate you all. Be sure to follow us on TikTok, Twitter. Subscribe to our YouTube. Noah, you can follow his personal Twitter, or you can follow my personal Twitter as well. Yeah, anything else we should plug, Noah? Our book, MidwesternMarks.com, for Thomas Reagan's new book.
I think we have another one. It's an academic text coming out very soon by Yanis Iqbal.
Yes.
That's just finishing up its last stage of edits right now, and it should be out very soon. I promise the reproletarianization pamphlet will be out soon as well.
Heck yeah, I can't wait for it.
And look forward to us playing Baldur's Gate together.
Yes, bet on it. All right, see ya, everybody. Solidarity.
And economic injustice cannot be solved without a radical redistribution of political and economic power.